of my time at Deloitte, they started a product team, and I was kind of the first ones to be like, yes, I want to do this, because it looked really awesome. And I'm glad I did, because the team was really focused on healthcare products. So we were working on home care products and also a cancer screening product. And with that product, I actually got the opportunity to travel, and we went to deploy it to New Zealand. And what was awesome is when COVID started in New Zealand, they used some of those components of that product to actually do the tracking of COVID in New Zealand. So immediately there, like I loved kind of the impact that you can have on people when you work in healthcare. And that's when I was like, I kind of knew that that's the industry that I wanted to kind of stay in for the next foreseeable future. And then I met awesome people at Dialogue, and they needed someone to join their product team and work on their member apps. And that's something I had always kind of wanted to do, is work on mobile applications and that sort of sphere. So I decided to join Dialogue, and that's kind of how I ended up in product, really.
Super cool, super cool. I think I'm going to pass it off to Kirsty. Let's hear about how you got into PM, specifically in the healthcare space.
Yeah, so I didn't know like product managing was a thing until fairly, recently, like in the last, I'd say 4 to 5 years. My undergraduate degrees, I have one is in theater performance, and the other one is in pre-med and biological sciences. So PMing was nowhere on my radar at the time. I kind of got into the healthcare space. I feel like the arts communities usually have a pretty good pulse on social justice issues, equity, inclusion. And so through my love for the arts is kind of how I first started getting involved in the Chicago community. And this involvement kind of naturally grew into a passion for removing barriers to access healthcare services, which is a huge problem in the States, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware. So that passion is kind of one of the reasons that I chose to work in the health tech field, and specifically why I choose to work at League. League is not my first startup. I was in another kind of tech startup in a slightly different role, but was one of the first US hires for League, which is mainly Canadian based out of Toronto, and started in operations. It was just me, and now there's like a team of 30 that does all the jobs that I used to do just by myself. And really just got to a point where the work that I was doing, I was most looking forward to working with other product managers and engineers about defining requirements in order to support our US customers. So that's kind of how I got involved. I was like, oh, this is my favorite part of my job on operations. And through that moved into our APM program.
Yeah, that is awesome background. I think very relatable, like even product management is still fairly new to me. So it's great to know that, not alone in this boat. Micah, you want to share how you got into PM in the healthcare space?
Sure. So I started my career at the young age of 20 as a computer programmer. So I started down that path of software engineering, loved it, and I eventually actually started working for a product manager at the time, and it was a weird coincidence. And he kind of had a similar experience to some of us, where he said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll manage an IT department or something. I don't know. And he's like, have you thought about my job? And I said to him, what is your job? Because it didn't make any sense to me. So he explained at length what his job was. And I was able to see some, similarities in the things that I like to do and things I'm good at, and how they would fit really well as a product person, and maybe not as well as a programmer, even though, still dabble. So yeah, I went down a path, that led me to product. And then since then I've worked in many companies and many industries as a product manager. I've been a product manager for probably more than 10 years, maybe 12. I don't know. It blurs together. As you get older, it blurs together. But one of the things that I really like about product, other than being able to, define a vision and bring a product to market and improve things and service customers and all that stuff. One of the things I really like about becoming a product person is it really gives you a lot of freedom. So when you ask the question of like, how did I choose healthcare? I didn't really choose healthcare. They ended up at PerkinElmer and contacted me opportunity, and I was able to go and work with those really bright, smart, super people again. And so one of the things that's interesting about product is that you don't get pigeonholed necessarily into one industry for your whole life. I've worked in finance and insurance and outsourcing and startups and cannabis and healthcare. So you really get to have a very broad experience as part of your career. And being a product person doesn't really hold you back from that, because the things you bring to the table are really focused on your ability to understand complex requirements and communicate between IT people and customers. And anyway, I'm rambling, but that's my answer to the question. How I got to PerkinElmer, I followed some people that I used to work with that were great people to work with, and that's something that you don't always get in your career, to be able to choose your team and work with people that you work really well together with. So that's what got me to PerkinElmer, and now that I'm there, it's great, and I'm going to be here for a while.
That's super cool. Very interesting background. Like you said, PM is really diverse. And that's something that I really love about product as well. So just moving on, I guess, from that question of the different kind of positions or industries that product has to deal with, we're also kind of interested in understanding the kind of technologies that your companies are using that have not been traditionally part of healthcare. Vanessa, like you said, you were part of kind of software development background. So from that experience, what kind of technologies do you see in health tech that you can share with us?
Yeah, so to start off, I think technology itself hasn't been used a lot in healthcare historically. I think you'd be surprised as to how much of the healthcare system still relies on good old fax. It actually blows my mind. Like last week I went to my family doctor and it took her 4 times to fax my prescription to my pharmacy. And I just find that it's so like technology is so not like used in healthcare in general. More specific to dialogue, I would say like the technology that hasn't been used a lot in healthcare is around AI. So the way we do triage of patients is that they have to answer a few questions, and then based on the initial questions, we determine if they're able to see someone virtually or if they need to go either to the ER or the walk-in clinic. So we actually built this triage with a team of doctors and a team of nurses, and we really took like health tech and a team of medical doctors to create this. And now we can ask you like 5 questions and we'll know what's kind of the best next step for you. And I think that has made the process of triage 5 times faster because of all that like work that we've done in the automation. So I would say that's probably something that we're using that's not traditionally used. And just automation in general. I think we've seen during the pandemic that our healthcare system, at least in Canada, is still very manual, and a lot of things are not automated. And like those peaks in the pandemic really like made our healthcare system crash in some ways. So we could benefit a lot from automation in the healthcare industry.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Automation is super powerful. And like you said, like technology is fairly new in healthcare. And I think it's really cool to see like the different companies kind of leveraging that. Christy, do you want to expand a bit more on that? What kind of technologies does your company use that's kind of new?
Yeah, so I think League has a really non-traditional approach to healthcare in that we're really trying to bring every aspect of that person's health and health journey into like one spot. So this means housing people's benefit information, Employers can host open enrollment and benefits administration through League. We have nurses and virtual care accessible from our platform. Users can complete challenges and goals to get points. We have like a whole marketplace where you can use those points to purchase goods and other health related items. So it's really just trying to take this massive, wide expanse of, healthcare and how do you manage your health as an individual, because there's a bajillion different components, and trying to put it into one thing, which is, not easy, but that's kind of our non-traditional approach.
That's awesome. I think there's a question in the chat that I want to address quickly because it has to do with kind of automation and I guess with COVID and the technology involved in that. And the question is, in what ways do you think automation and tech could have been used during pandemic besides contact tracing? Maybe we'll get to this question later, but I think it's about automation. So maybe it'd be good to address it now.
Oh.
You cut off, right?
Oh yeah, here I am again, I think.
Yeah, you're back now. We missed the question.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, the question was, it has to do with automation. So I think maybe this would be a good time to address it. It is about COVID and maybe we'll get to it later, but we can address it now. The question is, in what ways do you think automation and tech could have been used during the pandemic besides contact tracing? And the floor is open. Anyone can answer.
Sure. So one of the things that we worked with on the PC health app that was like really challenging, and in the States, it was also a nightmare too, but scheduling vaccination appointments was like a nightmare and a half. And I think part of that is because a lot of these points of service or, the pharmacy, because they don't have any digital systems that are automated, it's really hard to coordinate. Even just hearing kind of horror stories of friends that either called in or booked an appointment online and they've overbooked and don't have enough supply, and the phone list and the website bookings do not talk to each other. So that's one way. And another way, I think, which I'm still kind of surprised we don't have, is just like a wallet card in like your Apple Wallet that can house and be universally accepted for like your vaccination information when you're going to events or indoor dining or the airport, things like that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think from my side, thinking of my company's experience, the kind of company PerkinElmer is, and the other companies similar in scale, I think are actually really good case studies for, effectively deploying automation and technology throughout the pandemic. So, we always hear about the news in the government and what's happening, but behind the scenes, like for example, PerkinElmer, we were leading the charge in some of the vaccine research. And then we had our, test kits out for testing for COVID out really early and really quickly and in massive volume. And I think that speaks to the maturity of the space to an extent, and the fact that this was new, COVID was new, but scaling up research to product on the actual medical side is just the bread and butter of what they do every day. So I think that if you looked across the industry, you'd probably see lots of examples of those larger companies. You don't even hear about it, but behind the scenes, they move really quickly. Like I know I can't speak to the actual numbers, but PerkinElmer did a lot of business in the last 2 years, and not because they were, being trying to take advantage, just because they were the ones that were able to help out and move that stuff forward. So I think, again, without getting into all the specifics, I think that, it is a good example of ways that we, things can go really quickly because that's what they're used to doing.
Maybe just to add to that, like, when COVID started, we saw like a huge peak of incoming patients, mostly people asking questions about COVID. It was in March 2 years ago. 2 years ago, people were so no one knew really what it was, and the things that we did to make sure we would keep our waiting times stable and wouldn't give patients crazy waiting times is we really invested in automating kind of question and answers that people had on COVID. So, can I go outside after having 2 days of COVID symptoms. Like those were kind of things that people were coming on the platform to answer. So we kind of invested in more self-serve information that people could have readily available. But most importantly, I think we also invested in automating a lot of what the care team would do. So, like there's so many admin tasks, and I think that that's the case everywhere in our healthcare system. Like people spend so much time on administrative stuff that could be automated. And I think that once we allow our nurses to really be nurses and focus on our patients and not have to do like all their care plans and all their notes and all that stuff, that's when we're going to really see the benefits of tech-enabled healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. COVID definitely changed a lot for the healthcare space. Micah, I'm going to direct this question at you. And the question is, we want to know what excites you about the health tech industry and a PM's role in this industry. It's I wouldn't say it's niche, but it's definitely something that people don't necessarily consider all the time when it comes to product management, because it's often like software industries. So what excites you about health tech?
Yeah. My colleagues Vanessa and Christy are more in the startup, the small company type of place, and I'm in a very large old one. And so normally that makes you concerned that things are going to be slow and bureaucratic, which they are in certain areas. But one of the interesting shifts I'm seeing is that the healthcare industry has always been pretty advanced as far as technology on the instrumentation, on the tools side, but they haven't been on the software side. And so, I can speak for my company, and I can speak for some other ones that I know of that are larger, that they finally kind of caught on to the fact that software is done differently now. It is done much quicker, much more efficiently, and it's done in the cloud. And so, and I hate using that word, but so that is really, what excites me about my company is that, we make some of the best instruments and, some of the best, testing stuff, all that, but we make crappy software. It's like, one way I kind of explain it often to people is think back to, I'm sure you've installed a printer at some point. So your printer manufacturer, Canon, makes a really good printer. And they make a really good print cartridge. Now it's very overpriced, but it's very high quality. And you put those together and then you try and use the software, and the software is garbage. And so the thing that excites me about PerkinElmer is a similar analogy to that, where they make really good instruments and testing stuff, but their software and the way that we support our users is terrible, or not terrible, could be a lot better compared to what startups are doing, with modern technology. And my company is very open to that today. And so, my focus right now is really about developing software platforms and, enabling tools so that our other divisions and groups and things can accelerate their development using modern technologies and modern software stacks, and all cloud enabled, and getting off on-prem, because you don't really need that anymore nowadays, even though people think they still do. So that's what really excites me, is that, I'm working at a cool company. Cool, that's not the right word. I'm working at an interesting company that is large, that was old, if you want to think of it that way, but are open to, embracing the modern, software world, which is exciting because I can bring all my expertise and experience from past startups and apply it to this very interesting thing. Like one great example is one of the first projects I worked on was they were building a new instrument to do DNA analysis. And I was like, cool, I know nothing about science. I know nothing about healthcare, but let's figure this out. Let's learn about DNA sequencing. Anyway, so what was really interesting was that the product from a software perspective wasn't just this instrument. So we had to build a runtime to run on the machine and run the touch screen and actually open the drawer, and the whole user interaction, user experience on the machine. And then we had to build a web application that allows you to plan your projects or plan your experiments. And then we had to make another tool that was a data reviewer, and then tie them all together and put it in the cloud. So it was a very interesting thing where I'm seeing this physical machine being built and talking to the scientists about how they're going to use it, and then being able to work through those workflows to try and make their process better. So it's that's a long ramble, and sorry if I took too long, but I'm a little passionate about it because it's interesting. So that's from my perspective.
Yeah, that's super great. I think PerkinElmer is a cool company. Most definitely, in my opinion. Vanessa, I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on that. What excites you about the health tech industry from kind of a startup standpoint?
I think like what I mentioned previously, like the reason I joined health tech is really cheesy. I really just wanted to help reduce barriers to care, and I wanted to be part of the people that made our population healthier and got people the care that they needed. So that's it's the reason I like go to work every day. It's because when we release a new feature, I love seeing like the impact that it's having on our users and on our members. That's kind of really like why I joined the health tech industry and why I keep saying it. And it's the cheesy answer, but it's kind of the true answer.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's cheesy is perfectly fine. There's no problem with that at all.
We need
Yeah.
more cheesy.
We definitely do. Yeah, so I'll move on to the next question. I'll give this one to Kirsty. So what are some of the biggest challenges in being a PM in the health tech space? I guess you can speak on maybe specifically as a PM, what are some challenges? And maybe if you want to be more specific as to the health tech specifically.
Sure. Yes. So some of the challenges that we face as PMs in health tech when we're trying to automate and digitize everything is working with carriers. They are dinosaurs. They're very slow to change, but unfortunately, they hold a lot of the power in what we are and are not able to do and automate. So that's always a challenge, just trying to get carrier buy-in, really presenting to them why this is important for their business as well, not just for us. I would also say another challenge is the healthcare landscape is just so disparate. So you really have to deeply understand, be able to, it's extremely different. So keeping track of this is, it can be challenging. There's lots of differing rules and regulations around patients and privacy and even things like government mandates and those types of things. So there's just a lot of moving parts to keep track of, even just between two countries that are right next to each other.
Yeah, definitely a good point. Like, I guess when it comes to healthcare, there's like a lot of laws and stuff. I didn't even consider that, but that is a great point. I guess with that, I'm going to direct the next question to Micah. So I guess you're at PerkinElmer. You have such a diverse background of working like not just health tech as a PM, but specifically for health tech. What do you think are some unique qualities about being a PM in healthcare versus like finance?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And again, this will be my perspective will be from coming from other places into this industry. And again, so my experience is limited to PerkinElmer, and I used to work at Central Square, which is another technology healthcare company. But so the big differences, the big challenges I find are around the combination of the dealing with regulatory bodies. So we make a lot of things that need to be approved by the FCC in the US and like Health Canada. And so that whole process, actually even more than that, to get European approval, it's crazy. So managing that. So I have other people that do that, but as a product manager, I manage part of it, or I manage some of the people that do it, or I make sure that my stuff is lining up and timing with theirs. So managing that whole regulatory world and also managing what comes out of that. So, managing the regulations isn't that hard. For me, it's managing the culture that has been built up around that. So the culture that's been built up around that is that you need 100 people working on this, and you need to have all these meetings and check all these boxes and make all this documentation, because over the 100 times they've done this, every time something's gone wrong, they've made a new procedure for it. So I'm coming into a scenario where they want to overly manage and regulate everything, which means you can't move very quickly. So one of the challenges that I've been having is, being able to slice out what is not regulated. So if I'm working on something that's not a regulated product, I don't need to go through this whole RPD process. I can just short circuit it and do it really quick. The other area where there's challenges is that, we're often not just one team doing one thing, we're one piece of a larger puzzle, and those larger puzzle pieces might, require millions of dollars to build their instrument, or 3 years of time to build their instrument. So aligning all of that capital expenditure and the timelines to fit the little pieces of software in there that hold it all together as the glue while passing regulatory, I think that's some of the unique challenges for product people in health care, is managing that. Everything else is the same. Technology is the same. Customers are the same. I think those are kind of, to me, the unique areas. Oh, I guess the one other one would be not knowing the science. So I'm often in meetings with brilliant scientists, and I love picking their brains, but I don't fully understand what they're talking about because I didn't go to school for science. So yeah, I think that's one of the other ones, but that one hasn't really been a problem because we have smart people. So they're used to product people not knowing their side, just like they don't know my side, and we make it work.
Yeah, awesome. Any Kirsty or Vanessa, do you have anything else to add to that? What are some unique qualities of being a PM in healthcare specifically that you want to share?
Sure. Like, I think along the same lines, data privacy and regulations around data privacy are very different in the health industry. As you can imagine, we're dealing with personal health information, which is everything around your medical history, your medical records. And there's a lot of regulations around dealing with that really precious information from patients and from users. So on my end, making sure I'm always respecting data privacy and looping in compliance and legal is, I think, very unique to the healthcare industry. Like an example recently is that we have apps on the app stores, and Apple and Android have very specific data privacy agreements that you have to fill in and update every year. But the data privacy, even from the app stores, don't align with the healthcare data privacy, because in healthcare, you actually have to keep medical records for 5 to 10 years. And that's, I think, even just Canada. I'm sure Christy will have different ones in the US and in other countries. It's all different. And you always have to kind of respect even the province, the data privacy limitations. So I think that's one part of always kind of checking and making sure that's our top priority when we launch new features. I don't know, Christy, if you had your perspective on this one.
Yeah, definitely data and privacy and how you can store it and how long, and even where the servers are located physically. Yes. In US versus Canada is pretty wild. Yeah, and just think about other things that are kind of unique about being a PM in this industry. Because it's related to people's health, I think there's also kind of this underlying responsibility related to healthcare practitioners' Hippocratic oath of do no harm. So that's something that you kind of always have to be aware of and ensure that even subconsciously or unintentionally you're not negatively impacting people's health and access to care. It's just kind of an extra layer of consideration with everything that you do. Even if it's unintentional, you always kind of have to look at it through that lens, just because the stakes are different. It's people's health. It's very important.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so I guess we're talking a lot about data privacy, and a lot of that sounds like it's more on the computer side. I want to ask a question that's from the chat. Someone asked, as PMs, do you get to directly connect or talk with doctors or people solely in the healthcare space, and how do these conversations go? The floor is open. Yeah.
So I feel very privileged because our care team is actually people that work at Dialogue, and they're hired there. And back when we were in the office, we're not currently, but back when we were, it was really easy for us to connect with doctors, ask them their opinion on features, When we could even like shadow some of their work to really see kind of what we could improve for members. And I felt really privileged because at my previous company,
Yeah, I think that, so yes, I have access to customers. It depends on what your definition of a customer is. So my customers are often either internal stakeholders or scientists or lab techs and stuff. So I do get access to them. It's because of the size of the company, there's often layers. So often the decision to go to customers is more focused. Whereas, in startup days, I would just be, I just call a customer and go to their office. That does bring up a really good point around talking to customers. One of the things that I find very, not unique to product, but very interesting to product is, in my experience and with people that I've worked with for a long time, your intuition plays a very large role in this job compared to other roles. And so your intuition on how something should be built, how a feature should work, is it really needed, is much more of a priority as a product person. Now, you don't stop there. You don't just say, well, I know what's right, I'm going to do that. But you then take it from there and you find the data, not find the data to support it, because that sounds wrong, but you test your theories and you find some data to support your perspective. You do talk to customers, but I find that as a product person, there's more of that intuition involved than say other roles. And so for people that I've mentored in the past or that are looking to be a product person, that's one thing that you'll need to hone and get better and improve. And the way you do that is by trying everything, right? So yes, you're not a doctor, so you don't know a doctor's exact issues, but if you've played with all the different products and you've played with products across all different industries and you've tried everything and you're a real a new product manager, I probably would fall flat on my face because I probably would be completely wrong, because I'm like, well, why aren't they? So I think it's a combination and a process to get there, but it's definitely something that's important. And I don't think that was the answer to the question. I think I brought it in a different direction, but that's where I wanted to go.
No, that's perfectly fine. Great insight. I'm going to get to some questions that we I guess we're really interested in knowing. I'm going to direct this question at Kirsty. Oh, of course, my internet is dying on me. Wow, I really should not be moderating this. This is okay, am I back yet? I am. Okay, I really should not be moderating this. So. We'll know for next time. But the question is, how has COVID-19 impacted this industry and your company's product specifically? I'm going to pass this to Kirsty.
Yeah, so I think COVID-19, particularly in the US, has there's been a big power shift, because it kind of used to be that carriers held all the power and could kind of hold the rest of us hostage, and now that's shifted a bit. So the pandemic has enabled things like telehealth to be more widely used and actually covered by insurance, which historically actually wasn't always the case. Some services would not be covered by US health carriers. If it was like telehealth, it would have to be, like in person. I also think that the fact that in the US market, again, we were able to create vaccines that were free, paid for by the government, everybody had access. So that's, again, not very typical in our for-profit healthcare system. So I'm really curious to see kind of where the intersection of these two things go moving forward as we're trying to digitize and expand access to other services. And I think that the telehealth piece is just going to be so important, especially as we move forward. And I think it's going to be a really exciting space to watch.
Yeah, that's super cool. Micah, do you want to add anything to that? I want to know how COVID has also impacted PerkinElmer.
Um, it wasn't a bad thing. I mean, like, it's hard to say that because, it was such a terrible thing for the world and for me personally and whatever. But I think as a large provider of technology and, testing kits and stuff like that, it was a time of large growth. So I think one of the big things we're looking at now is how to sustain that growth. By causing more COVID? No, by finding different avenues where we can apply our technology and improve things. So yeah, I think COVID has been interesting in the industry. Being in Canada, opposite from Christy, it has been a different experience, I think, because of our universal healthcare. But yeah, so COVID-19 impacting the industry, I think it's only impacted them for the majority of the industry, I think it's impacted it in a positive way. So either they realized that maybe they weren't up to snuff in some areas, or they weren't efficient enough. And so they, by being thrown into the fire, they've had to become more efficient. So I think for the most part, the healthcare industry has done well with COVID, and it's been a good thing, a good change. Oh, that's terrible. I can't believe I'm saying that. But yeah, it's been a good thing.
I think you're being very honest. I think like the COVID honestly had like a great growth for us, probably like Micah as well and Christy as well. Like we were in the right place at the right time. And similarly to Christy, like we saw a huge spike in the telehealth need in Canada and in the US as well. It's just like now when people can't walk to a walk-in clinic, they prefer to not have to go outside and not possibly catch COVID, and instead just do it while they're sitting in bed and see a doctor in that way instead. So I think that in a way, you were very honest, but in a way it's very true. Like it has made it a lot, it has made telehealth and healthcare industry innovate a lot faster. Suddenly, like the healthcare industry was like releasing things like so fast, whereas in the past it was a much more slower industry. So I think I would echo both of what you just said for COVID.
Well, that's super interesting to hear. Yeah, so I guess it created almost like a opportunity for growth. So that's super cool. I'll move on to the next question. So we are wondering, I'll pass this to Kirsty first, maybe. What are some emerging trends in the health tech industry that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've kind of noticed across the board, and I think it's like really important, is is just the importance of mental health coming into the spotlight. I think this shows up as there's kind of more mental health focused apps that you can get on your phone or have access to on your computer. We've seen a lot of our employer groups expanding the mental health benefits that they offer to their employees, or like building out specific mental health related offerings. Insurance carriers expanding kind of their coverage and costs for telehealth mental therapy as well. It's been really cool. And just like as a real life example, League started like a mental health employee resource group, and we added like specific mental health days that employees have to take once every quarter. So we've seen that expand in our own company, and then also in a lot of our employers that we work with have been investing a lot of time and money into supporting mental health.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Mental health is always very important, and it's great to see that's like being brought into the spotlight. Vanessa, do you have anything to expand on that in terms of what other health trends are coming out?
It's really funny because I had the same one. Mental health is, yeah.
It's a hot trend.
It's the hot trend. And I think like after the pandemic, like mental health is on everyone's mind. HR leaders, everyone, like we've been working remotely for 2 years for a lot of us. And I think it's taking a toll on people's mental health. So I put it down as my emerging trend as well. And the thing I wanted to add also is I think there's also different ways now of helping people with their mental health. And it's not always kind of the traditional, like you speak to a mental health professional. Like some people still see a stigma with like reaching out. So offering other ways of getting help for mental health, like using self-serve content content, like ways to learn more about anxiety and how to deal with some of depression, like just having more ways for people to get help for mental health, I think is going to be the hot topic, and it is currently, and it's just going to keep going, I think.
Yeah, that is awesome to hear. I'm going to ask one more question. Micah, I'm going to give you this one before we move on to our audience Q&A. So the question is, how do you think the roles of PMs in this industry will change in the future? Or if they will change, maybe they won't.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think, so I'll speak for everyone for a second. And I think where we're going to see the change is if you go back a while, if you go back 10 years, there wasn't very many startup healthcare companies, right? That's a new trend that's followed along, startups in other industries. And so the startup companies are embracing modern technology and modern approaches to software development life cycles, whereas the older companies, the more established ones, were not. And I think what you're going to see is a combination of and continuing increase in startups, effect on the market and the size of the pie they're going to have until they get purchased, because they're all going to get bought out eventually. But also you'll see on the larger company side, on the more established player side, you'll see a shift towards adopting those modern practices. So similar to what I'm doing at PerkinElmer now, I feel you'll see that throughout the industry as they start to find where they can have that leverage, where they, why they need to focus on UX and UI, why they need to focus on cloud and AI and machine learning, because all the startups are going to do it and they're going to steal all your business. And so I think that you'll see, a combination of that, the startups continuing to grow and have an outsized weight within the industry until they're all purchased. And then from the established companies, you'll see them starting to adopt, slowly at first, but starting to adopt modern practices like Agile and cloud and things like that, where it makes sense. So there's always going to be some areas where it doesn't make sense, but I think that focus on user experience and automation and AI, all that really is starting to become the norm versus just, one in 1,000. So I think that's where you're going to see the biggest change. So what that means is we need more traditional product managers. So historically in healthcare, a product manager was more of the business side product manager. They were more of the MBA type person where they focused on your P&Ls, which all that's important. And product management is a spectrum itself, from being a business side to a pure tech side to everything in between. But I think there is historically a lot more focus on the business side versus the technology side. So I think you'll see a lot more focus on that, or a lot more splits between having a business side PM and a product owner on the tech side that work together. Things like that, I think, is where you're going to see a lot of change in the industry.
Yeah, that's super exciting to hear. Very good insight. So we have a little bit of time left. I'm gonna get you guys to answer some of the Q&A that we have from our audience. So the first question is, given that you guys have an excellent knowledge of product management, specifically in the healthcare industry, are you able to provide examples of specific healthcare products you have managed or researched on? And I'll leave the floor open. I'm sure everyone has something that they can talk about. Or maybe I'll pick on someone. Maybe I'll pass to Kirsty first.
Yeah, so the area of product that I'm working on is specifically benefits administration. So making sure people's benefits work correctly, which, sounds simple, but it's really not. There's lots of rules, lots of points of data that you have to get over to carriers. So like an example of like a very specific project that I work on to kind of give you an idea of like what projects look like at League. One kind of project that we might work on is age-based terminations and rules for like volume-based benefits. So as you get older, basically the amount of coverage that you can have for like voluntary life and things like that is decreased by a certain percentage. So we have to tell our system like, hey, this person is this old, and so therefore they can only have, this amount of coverage. And then once we've kind of got that in our enrollment system, then it's making sure that we're transferring that data correctly to the carriers, and then also making sure that the benefit is priced correctly. Kind of one of the more exciting things that we're working on like our health side is we're working on like challenges. So having employer groups being able to have their members all participate in like a 10,000 steps a day challenge or things like that. And so how we have done it for kind of all these things is we rolled out internally. So all of us leaguers kind of get to get a sneak preview of what everybody's working on and enroll in these challenges and gather data and see, okay, what kind of user behaviors made people drop off from this challenge? What things were people like repeatedly going back to do, or actions that they were repeatedly taking in the app? So we also kind of get to do fun things like that just because we're usually our own guinea pigs. So it's kind of fun that way.
Yeah, that is awesome. Vanessa, do you have any specific examples of healthcare products that you've managed or worked on?
Yeah, I think I'll give the example of the cancer screening program that I worked on at my previous company, because I think it's interesting to see like the power of like automation that we talked about. So what we were doing is that we were rolling out nationwide bowel cancer screening program for the population in New Zealand. And how it works is in New Zealand, once you turn 65 and it's your birthday, you receive actually a bowel cancer screening kit at home, and you get to actually do the test at home, send it back to the health administration, and then they'll do the tests. And then based on your results, they'll then send you to more diagnoses, and you'll actually start the kind of cancer screening diagnosis path. So before, kind of all of that was really not automated, and it would take a lot of time from their health authority, and it meant that not a lot of people were actually getting screened. So what we did is we kind of put it all together, tried to automate as much as possible so that when you actually turn 65, 2 weeks later, you get your kit, and it's all kind of done like without much human interaction. And at the end of that, once we launched, like we actually saw like the impact on like detection and decreasing cancer rates. So that's a project that I worked on at my previous company. And that's kind of where what I was saying, when like automating stuff can actually really have a huge benefit on people's health. And I thought it was really exciting because I got to travel all around. So that's also an added bonus.
That always makes it exciting.
Very jealous, very jealous. Micah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two quick ones I can share to kind of show some of the breadth of things that you could work on. So currently I'm working on two things at the same time, or more. One is so we make all these instruments. One's called the Janus. I don't know where they got the name from. It's a liquid handler. So it's a robot that grabs things and fills them up and does things with them and moves them around. And sometimes it breaks, or sometimes things go wrong. So we've actually developed a companion system called PKI, which is basically a bunch of cameras, IP cameras that plug onto the machine, that plug into a computer, and then send the data to the cloud. And so this system allows you to, record videos when things go wrong, or allows you to see that the machine's working, things like that. Basically, Nest cameras for your scientific equipment. And so it was built with a contractor, kind of like an MVP, and they really like it. The problem is they made it really poorly, and it's really terrible and ugly. And so right now, one of the projects I'm working on is, basically rebuilding it. So giving it a modern user interface, improving some of the hardware challenges. So, there's a lot of limitations on the hardware side from design choices that were made. So that's one initiative. So building out basically a whole product line around these cameras on these equipment. On the flip side, I'm also running our software platforms team, which is, commissioned with building out tools for the rest of the company to use. So for example, we have a lot of teams that build software platforms, and every software platform needs a way to authenticate users. Every software platform needs a way to manage tenants, so you can have multiple tenants on your application. Every product needs to have user access control, things like that. So my team is actually, building out those components, leveraging modern technology like Auth0 and AWS and all that stuff, so that we can basically go to all the other parts of the company and like, oh, you're building a new, web application for your new product. Here you go. take all this stuff off the shelf. It's fully modern, fully up to date, fully security spec'd out, and you can accelerate your development by 30% potentially of the time that you would normally have had to spend on doing all this stuff. And this is also stuff that's very error prone. So like if you don't know how to set up security, you shouldn't be doing it. So that's, I think, a good example of, the far left field and right field of things that I work on, physical cameras on an instrument to, reusable software components. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, all that is super interesting, super, super neat stuff. We have a minute left. Maybe I'm going to leave off on this last question because a little selfish for me, but I'm also interested in knowing this. I'm going to direct it at Kirsty first. Do you have any advice on how to break into health tech from a non-tech background? I'm interested in that too.
Yeah. So for me, with a background in the arts and pre-med biology, what I kind of spent a lot of time thinking about and doing is a lot of the skills that you need to be a successful PM are probably things that you're already doing just in other areas of your life that you're not really thinking about. Vanessa, you said communication is super important. I also think like creative problem solving is very important. There are things like, when you're working in theater, it's all ensemble work, all teamwork all the time. You can't make theater by yourself. So I think just really focusing on things that you're probably already doing that are very transferable and really sharpening those up. So whether that's taking on like an additional project or like lab work or something outside of your kind of normal curriculum where you can work with TA or somebody that can kind of give you more direct feedback and experience. Whether that's, like volunteering in an area that you're interested in. I think Canada typically also does like co-ops, which for students, which we don't really do in the States, we kind of just have like internships. And then if you can't get into the role that you want, look at the adjacent roles. So myself, I started in operations and kind of made my way into product management. So I think if you're just having a really tough time getting the exact role you want, look at kind of the one step away roles. And once you're in that role, see how you can collaborate and learn from the people that are in the roles that you want at wherever you're working.
Yeah, and Micah, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say with that. So it kind of relates to the other question in there, which is what are some technical skills? So Kirsty kind of expand on those non-technical skills. So from a technical standpoint, what are some good things to know?
Yeah, I can't speak to the healthcare side of the question because I don't know. I don't know what you need to know to get into healthcare. I've been doing product for too long for that. But as far as breaking into product, I think technical skills are great, but I don't think they're the end all and be all. So I often speak about my past experience as a programmer and how it helps me, and it does. But that's not the thing that makes a product manager great. And a product manager is a really interesting role where it doesn't fit into every classification. So to be a good product manager, you need to be someone who's confident. You need to be someone who's outspoken. You need to be someone who can solve complex problems really easily. You need to be that traditional jack of all trades where you understand just a little bit of architecture and you understand just a little bit of software and you understand a little bit of science so that you can speak to all the people, because really you're kind of like a parent where you have to manage all the different groups, the customers and the developers, and we all know developers are babies, and all of the salespeople and all of the executives. So really, to be a good product manager, you need to have that balance of confidence, vision, ability to communicate really effectively and clearly, but also the ability to understand and solve problems. So again, a lot of those are nebulous things that are hard to pinpoint. How do you get better at them? I don't have time to explain that, but there's ways. But yeah, I think those are really, product role isn't for everyone. Actually, a great comment I didn't add yet that my first boss gave to me is he said that a product person has all the responsibility and none of the authority. And I've always kept that in mind because it's really important. I have to get people to build things for me and they don't work for me. Now, I do have product managers that work for me, but that's different. But generally, you have all the responsibility to deliver a product to satisfy the customer's needs, to ensure that you're meeting your P&Ls, but you can't actually make anyone do anything. And so again, that's an interesting role for people to have to, play. And it's not for everyone, but the people that like those kind of challenges, it's very rewarding.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for all that insight. So we're 4 minutes over time, so we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you for everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your experience in healthcare. It was super interesting to hear, and I learned a lot, and I hope everyone who's here also learned a lot too. So we have, I put it in the chat, and it's a form we want everyone to fill out to kind of give us insight on whether this was a good talk with the panelists. I thought it was, so I hope everyone else also thought it was. I apologize for my internet. That's on me, but I hope everyone had a good time. Thank you for joining us. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their night, and check out UWPM for all our future events too, because we'll have a lot of those coming up. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me. Good night.
Proud of me.
Thank you.